to join us, so I told them we would record. So hello again, and welcome to our session on job training coordination program. And our special guest today is Chelsea Canterbury with the Department of Education. And I'm going to go ahead and let her take it away.
Thank you very much, Melissa. So hi, everybody. Oh, so sorry about that. I am Chelsea Canterbury from the department. I have the great privilege of serving as the Office of Career Technical Education Program Specialist for Job Training Programs, which is what we're going to talk about today. I would like to encourage everybody to type questions in the chat as we go through, or we're a small group, so just go ahead and unmute, and we'll be able to answer your questions as we go through. I have a slide deck that I'm going to attempt to share. We'll see if we can make this happen. Sent that guy. All right. Everybody can see that, right? We're good. So we're going to talk today about everybody can probably see that, can't they? So we're going to do just a quick overview of career technical education. Then we'll talk specifically about job training. We'll do an overview of the whole program. We'll talk a lot about student placement and who is the best person to be placed in a job training program and where else students can go if they're not in job training. And then some overall considerations, and we should have lots of time for questions when we get to the end. So to start off, I want everyone to know that career technical education is public education. It is an extension of what we offer K-12 throughout the state. And in every way, we have to provide a free and appropriate public education to all students, including our students with disabilities. As career tech, as recipients of Perkins funds and the representatives of that federal program, we have to ensure that we're meeting the federal regulations of having zero barriers to enrollment. I know that a lot of people have moved towards a lottery system for enrollment in career technical education. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lottery. What's most important is that all of our students have equal access, that any student who wants to participate in CTE has that opportunity. So regardless of their credits, their academic competency, behavior, and attendance history, every student that wants to be in CTE should be in CTE. As career tech, we also have a lot of on and off ramps for our students to explore the ways that they participate in CTE and find their pathway, find their passion, starting as early as grade 7 with our career connections or our introductory courses, our middle grades courses, in our high school level classes, which can start as early as grade 7. But it's important that we're always thinking about how we can provide for our students the opportunities that they need to be successful in whatever their future career and passion might be. Again, career tech is for all students, whether they are military bound, college bound, going directly into the workforce. We're meeting the needs of all kids where they are. When we're thinking about career technical education, like I said, have to provide FAPE to every student who's enrolled. Today, in talking about job training, we're talking about a special population of students, those with the most significant cognitive disabilities. And those are going to be special education students or students who are always on an IEP. We have to remember that our special ed students are always general education students first, that they have every opportunity to be placed with typical peers, participate in the same activities as their typical peers, and that they are not always excluded in an environment that is only with other students with disabilities. It's also important to remember that it's not equitable and truly not fair to the student if we predetermine their ability to be successful in a program based on past performance. And also we have to think about this definition of success as being the opportunity to participate and to learn and to grow from the career technical education opportunity, not necessarily the student's ability or desire to pass a web exam or to earn an industry credential. It's all about that exposure and their chance to learn what they might be best at so that they're prepared for their adult life. And in the same way, we have to make sure that we're avoiding steering or suggesting that our students participate in one program over another based on its proposed difficulty or purported difficulty, and that every student has the equal access to participate in any program of their choosing. Our traditional career tech, which is very often offered at our career tech centers in Ohio, can be offered to students at any age from grades 7 through 12. When we're talking about a traditional program, we're talking about a single pathway with 4 courses. Job training coordination is one of the many pathways that are available to our students in career technical education. It can and should be treated just like every other pathway. It has a few exceptions, but it is a workforce development pathway. That our traditional career tech programs are open to all populations of students, regardless of need, that they're always placed in the least restrictive environment, and also that job training, which is what we're going to talk about, is the only program in all of career technical education that should be composed only of students with disabilities. Every other program should be composed of a variety of students of different levels. JTC is unique in that it serves just that specific population because they're not able to participate in other career tech labs. We always want traditional career tech to be the first choice placement for our students. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So what is this thing called JTC, or Job Training Coordination? Like I said, it is a full workforce development pathway. It's only 2 courses because they have special length requirements, but it can and should be treated just like any other workforce development pathway in that it is preparing students for their future career. It does serve students, a very small population of students, only those with the most significant cognitive disabilities. And we'll talk more about that placement and decision later. It can take place in a traditional school setting or a career center. What's special about job training is that it truly is the means by which students are receiving special education and related services through career technical education. So by placing a student in a job training program, the IEP team is determining that that is the best way for them to receive their special education and related services, including transition services, via career tech. And also, what gets more confusing is that JTC is both the program name, Job Training Coordination, and the instructor's title, a Job Training Coordinator. So when we say JTC, we really mean the whole package. From a logistics and planning perspective, JTCs should be a 2-year program, but it also can, of course, be more as a student is needing to stay in the program longer. Many students in a JTC are those who choose to defer graduation because they have not yet met either their graduation goals, they have not yet earned a traditional diploma, or they haven't yet met their transition goals. So in the first year that a student is enrolled in the program, they are in Introduction to Job Training. And in the second and every subsequent year, they would be in the course Fundamentals in Job Training. When we have schools that have 2-year programs and their students are combined, when we have 10 or 11th and 12th graders, or 10th and 11th and 12th graders, and then 23 students all in one classroom together, sometimes that coding structure doesn't work perfectly. In that case, we recommend that schools code on alternate years. So in even years, you'll use the year 1 code. In odd years, you'll use the year 2 code, or whatever else works for you. If you have enough students to have a leveled program, then this traditional structure would also work for you. Also, JTCs have to be scheduled for at least 240 hours a year. as it is a complete workforce development pathway in and of itself, but it can be scheduled for up to 1080 hours or 1080 hours, which means a full day. Students could be enrolled in a job training program. The special staffing requirements of people who are in this role are people who have either a career technical education license, an intervention specialist license, or a pupil services license, in addition to a transition to work endorsement. The folks who are working with and teaching this population of students need to have specialized skills to meet the needs of these students and to prepare them for future workforce. Also, because these people are a job training coordinator or a JTC, is indeed a lab teacher of a full workforce development pathway. Just because they might have an intervention specialist license doesn't mean that their time can sort of be double booked, if you will, and that they should be serving as a full-time teacher and have a caseload of students. We have to make sure that our JTC instructors have the amount of time that they need to teach and to plan and to do all of the things that our traditional workforce pathway teachers would have. If they only have a half-day program, perhaps then they would have the time to have some additional a caseload of students or provide some other specially designed instruction in a different area. But it's important that we remember that for our teachers and so that our students receive as much support as possible. Also, when we're thinking about starting or hosting a JTC program, there is going to be some additional staffing involved. When we're talking about our students with the most significant needs, they're going to need job coaches. Depending on our population, we might need paraprofessionals or educational aides in the classroom to make sure that all of the accommodations and modifications can be made for the benefit of the student, and also that we're following all the guidelines in their IEPs. So the program itself, when we're talking about running on a day-to-day basis, has two components. The most important is community-based experiential learning. We take these students and we get them out in the community, experiencing different job opportunities. Truly, we should choose opportunities that are aligned to their PINs, preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. All of that learning, or all of those experiences, should truly be able to be counted as work-based learning. If we're aligning the work that they're doing with their post-secondary plan, we can create learning agreements that ensure that these hours that students are working in the course can count as work-based learning. Also, for students in a JTC, most of that experiential learning will have to be supported by job coaching staff, whether that's paraprofessionals, additional instructional aides, or you're supplementing with OOD, Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, or other agencies and organizations. These students likely, especially at the beginning of their time in the program, will need additional supports that then can use a phase out strategy until they're able to be independent in each of their job roles. And then the other piece of a JTC is classroom instruction, which is going to be based on the needs of each individual student. What does the student need to be successful in that specific work environment that we have decided to place them in collectively, or that they have chosen for themselves? I'm going to pause there and see if we have any questions.
You do have a question from Molly.
Molly?
And she says, work-based agreements, would this be an agreement with the student, the workplace, and what would this look like?
That is a good question. Thank you, Molly. So work-based agreements, truly what I might mean by that is the learning agreements that any other traditional student would have when they're earning their work-based learning hours. It's going to be an agreement between the student, the work placement, and whoever is working with that student in that support role. The third party has to be a school representative, whoever the district or the school decides that's going to be. For students in a job training program, those are going to be based on the curriculum guide for job training, which generally is the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal rubric. So what the student would be working towards is mastering, or at least getting up to proficient on the OMJ rubric when they are in the work-based learning placement, as well as any other specific skills that the student needs to master. Anything else that I'm missing? Alrighty.
So more of a follow-up from Molly. Also, with so many hours doing work-based learning, how would the student earn their credits?
Also a good question. So the students don't necessarily have to be in 1080 hours of job training. That's going to be based on the way that the district decides to structure the program. Many of the programs that I'm aware of in the state are half-day programs, where students are in lab for half the day and then in their academic courses for half of the day. In a lot of cases too, depending on the needs of the student, they might be a student who has deferred graduation. And so the work that they're doing in the course is really all that they have left to do because they've already earned their academic requirements or their seals or whatever else they need to be able to graduate. Awesome. All right, we're going to keep going and I will pause again for questions soon. Thank you. All right. So super excited to be able to say that in winter of 2023, which is right around the corner, we should be able to release the updated GTC curriculum guide. The current curricula standards, as they are called, is about 54 pages of competencies that students are supposed to be able to master, rather than truly being flexible and meeting the needs of this specific population of students. So the new curriculum guide has 7 different units that truly hit on what industry experts and those in the special education community think is what our students most need to be successful in the workplace post-graduation. So the new guide is structured not as a list of competencies, but instead as a list of essential questions that students will be able to answer to the best of their ability in a way that is meaningful to them. And then hopefully we'll be able to see their evolution as they go throughout the program from the beginning of year 1 through their second year or beyond. So rather than it being a list of, I can make a resume, I can explain exactly how to fill out a job application, it's those students may have different supports to be able to help them with those things. So instead, it's all about helping a student to develop better self-advocacy skills and understand what they need to do to be successful for themselves, however they and their family define that. If we don't know where to start, and sometimes those questions can be a little bit daunting, each one of the units is based on both the Career Technical Education Strand 1 standards, which is every career tech program in the state of Ohio shares Strand 1, and that does not exclude job training. It's just organized a little differently. And then also the Ohio Means Jobs rubric criteria. So by the nature of the program, our students are already learning those skills that they need to also earn that skill, to earn that seal and continue to develop. That's the classroom portion of the stuff. The other half of the program and the truly important part is the experiential learning. We get our students out in the community as much as possible into a position that they can hopefully hold independently at the time of graduation. The dream for every student in a job training program is that they are successfully placed before they graduate in a job that they might hold for the next several years. A lot of times we talk about transferable skills when we're talking about this population of students, but helping in the t-shirt shop in the high school may not truly be as easy for these students to transfer the skills to a retail setting. So again, it's important that we place them in a community around typical peers and that they're able to grow their skills, that job coaches are able to pull back those supports, and that the students can be independent. Wait and see if I've got any questions on that one. Looks like we're good. Alrighty. What's wonderful about job training is that it can be so incredibly flexible based on your staffing, based on the needs of your students, based on your location. Sometimes geography plays a huge role in whether students have easy access to public transportation. So there's not a right or a wrong way to schedule the program. There are schools that I know of that have their classroom portion for 120 hours in the morning, and then they have a single period of work-based learning in the afternoon, or 2 periods in the afternoon. So they're able to split that time separately. I have programs that are truly a full day of job training, and they're able to integrate some of their academics and have other teachers rotate into the classroom on some days. And then on other days, they are off and on a job site for the full day. So that's what the on and off days mean. There are programs where some students will travel in small groups to a single job site because they share those interests. There are students that are doing some more independent travel training, and they're able to get to their work site on their own. People going in vans and getting dropped off in different places based on where they're going to work. There are programs that do like cohort models where they'll alternate, like these 3 kiddos go out to the job site on Monday and Tuesday, and then those same students will be in the classroom on Wednesday and Thursday, and then on Friday everybody goes to a certain different site. And then lastly, there are also programs around the state where every student's schedule is completely individualized. The student, based on their job placement, is going to be at work Monday, Thursday. On Tuesday and Wednesday, they'll do their academics. And then on Friday, they'll be in the JTC all day working on those skills. So there's not a wrong way to do it. It's just based on how flexible can we be to support the needs of the student and to make sure that they're learning the skills that they need to be successful in competitive integrated employment. When we're talking too about putting our students with significant needs out at job sites, it's important to constantly be thinking about what is in the best interest of the student. Any internship, specifically an unpaid internship, must by definition be of primary benefit to the student and not to the organization where the student is working. So SELN, the State Employment Leadership Network, has some working guidelines around unpaid work for students and individuals with disabilities. Their guidelines very clearly explain that it must be very clear, aka have a learning agreement in place, that a student who is in an unpaid work experience must understand that the purpose of the experience is to grow their skills. If we're looking at students who are doing menial tasks for the benefit of an employer, as opposed to something that is truly going to help them in future further employment where they can be competitively employed and continue to earn their skills, wrapping silverware is maybe for a full 10 hours. Maybe not the best job training for our students. They have a lot more capacity than that, especially when that work goes unpaid. When in doubt, students should be paid. When in doubt, students should earn at least the minimum wage. And that's all in the SELN guidelines. So when we're talking about placement, what students do we serve in a job training program? The answer is always going to be as few as possible because we want the rest of them to be in a traditional career tech program. But there are going to be students who this is where they are best going to be served. So if the goal for the student is that they're able to grow their professional skills, receive some on-the-job training to match their ability and their interest with the need, if our hopeful outcomes for that student is to fulfill their transition goals and that their goal is competitive integrated employment, then we have a potential candidate. When it comes time to decide which students will truly be best suited for this program, there is a decision-making framework, which I'll talk about here in a second. Essentially, what the decision making framework talks about is that a student has to have received pre-ETS, pre-employment transition services, so that they know what they do and don't want to do, that they are between the ages of 16 to 21, that they must have a substantially modified curriculum. Students who just have accommodations in a traditional classroom or in a career technical education classroom would not be candidates for a job training program. It has to be something that's substantially modified to the point where they're not truly getting the core. A way that we like to think about it is students who are alternatively assessed or may have historically been alternatively assessed are potential candidates for a job training program. That does not mean that they would automatically be the right choice to go into a job training program. And then lastly, on the decision-making framework, it talks about whether or not the student has in fact attempted a traditional career tech course. In all circumstances, our first goal is to have a student, even with modifications, be enrolled in a traditional career tech program of their interest. Essentially, at the end of the day, the placement is determined by the IEP team, making sure that that student truly is in the least restrictive environment. Choosing to place a student in a job training program means choosing to place a student only with other students with disabilities and not with typical peers. So it's not a decision to be taken lightly if we're going to be restricting that student from being with typical peers and having that same experience. So the decision-making framework is very truly a flow chart, and it's easy for IEP teams to go through to make the decision, to have the discussion about whether or not job training is the best placement for a student. So also, lastly, in thinking about placement for a student in a job training program, like we said, LRE, always king. But also that any student who might qualify for a job training program using the decision-making framework, using the IEP team, looking through those goals, we can't then turn them away. It's still career technical education. We can't have admission requirements for students who would qualify and be best served in a job training coordination program. We can't require that they get transportation to and from a job site. If it's CTE, we have to provide that for them. We can't interview students to determine whether or not they're a good fit. If they need the supports of a JTC, then they need the supports of a JTC, and that's where we need to place them. And also, something that we're seeing is that some schools are enrolling students in a JTC program that are actually participating full-time in a CTE lab. If a student's enrolled in a CTE lab, then they're in that lab. It is true that job training programs do not have the expectation of students passing a web exam, but like we talked about earlier, the ability to pass or to not pass a web exam should not exclude a student from the opportunity to participate in a traditional lab setting. So some advantages to think about is that it's embedded work-based learning into the program when we're talking about alternative graduation requirements, when we're talking about building skills in the real world, and the applicability of the stuff that students are learning in the classroom. Work-based learning is one of the best career advising methods that we can get students out into competitive integrated employment. Also, it will provide our students with essential skills to be successful. We're also integrating the OMJ seal. Again, more think smarter, not harder when we're talking about these students in graduation. And then another advantage is the flexibility that there isn't a web exam. The standards themselves are no longer standards. It's truly a guide for how to meet students where they are and to provide for them the education that they need to be successful in post-secondary life, whatever that looks like for them. And it, of course, also comes with the additional Category 2 CTE weighted funding. Of course, if we're talking about this population of students, they will also have other additional IDEA dollars that are attached to their student FTE, or the amount of money that they bring in individually, to support the hiring and promotion of intervention specialists to earn their TTW, or for job coaches, or for transportation, or for whatever other needs programs have to support this population of students. And I talked really quickly, so I apologize for that. However, I do have our contact information here. Should you want to reach us, we are always available. And I believe Melissa's probably going to be able to send these slides out when we're done. So I've had a couple links in there.
Yes, everybody, I'll send the slides out, and I also put in the chat a link to a Padlet. So that has all the resources of the professional learning sessions I've been doing in Region 13. And later, it'll probably be Monday that because I'm at a conference right now, but this recording will also be there. So I'll also put the SELN guidelines there for you to be able to find quickly. And I'll link to the work-based learning agreement as well. So there's a lot of stuff already there. So feel free to look and see what you need. And then early next week, the recording will be there in case you want to share that with anyone else. Does anybody have any more questions for Chelsea?
Well, I'm happy to always answer questions as things come up after the fact. I know sometimes I always take a couple of days to process. And if you're thinking about starting a program, or you need some supports in building a program that you already have, always happy to help.
So this is what the Padlet will look like. Move my little thing over. So you've got different activities that have taken place. So I've got a placeholder for today's session. And then I also linked to, we have some coffee chats, just learning more about career tech. And then 4 times a year, we also do a statewide CTPD and Special Ed Leaders Network. And the previous meeting and the resources from that are linked in that Padlet. So I just linked everything here. And then real quick, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick little feedback for us, we would really appreciate that. And I'll put that link in the chat as well. Let's see. You are welcome for the information. Thanks for joining us on a lovely afternoon.
Melissa, thank you. Always fun.
You're welcome, Chelsea. Thanks for joining us. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And then if anyone has a question that they didn't want on the recording, that's absolutely fine as well.